Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today at On the Level. Today we're going to be discussing quality assurance testing of software with a very good friend of mine, valued champion of QA testing for many, many decades, and who has also played a big role in the development of what we are doing in Rwanda with a company called Muraho Technology, which is a sister company of Levvel, based in Calgary and now operating in Toronto and Ottawa, Montreal area. So our guest today for our conversation, I would love you just to sit in and hear what Randy has to share, is Randy Rice from Rice Consulting. Randy has worked for many, many clients over the years in QA testing, including NASA, I believe the Stock Exchange, many other large organizations, as well as smaller companies that are looking to seek the greatest value in their investment in software development and bringing exceptional value to the customers that they serve. If I've got that right, Randy?
That's pretty much it.
Okay, awesome. And if you would just take 1 minute, Randy, and give us a little bit of your own background about, where testing began for you, what you see as, as interesting aspects and even some failures that you've witnessed over the years, to put everything in perspective here.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'd be happy to. In fact, it's one of my favorite stories to tell because I came into testing from the development side of the house. Typically, you'll see either people come in from the dev side or from the business side. I was a coder for about 10 years, and I was also a member of a computer science book club. And so I'm just one of those who love to read books in my profession and all kind of other places. So I forgot to send my card in. This was back in the day where if you didn't send the card in, then you got the selection of the month. And it just so happened that the selection of the month for the month I forgot to send my card back in was Boris Beiser's software testing technique. So I open up the box, see the book, and immediately think, testing? Why do I need a book? Classic response, right, from a developer.
Yeah.
And but the funny thing happened was I started reading the book, and it's a very technical book. So, it wasn't like you should be doing this, you should be, but it was filled with all kind of charts and graphs and flow charts. And I started actually doing the stuff, not only reading, but applying it. And all of a sudden, my code started getting better. I started getting advances and promotions and raises and things. And before long, I was managing, and I hated managing. I love coding. But one of our clients, I was working for one of the big 6 firms. One of our clients needed a QA test manager for a project. And so I went to work for the client. And I literally, all I knew about testing was what I had read in that book. In 2 years, I had this baptism in quality assurance and testing, and we went from a 50% failure rate of changes down to a 2%. I wish it could have gotten lower, but I left them in a good place. And when I left, I started Rice Consulting. But bottom line is, I, like a lot of other testers, didn't plan to be in testing, didn't plan to be in QA, but it was a field I was perfectly suited for and love it. And I've been doing this now for 33 years. And then you tack on 10 years of coding on top of that. I'm old. What can I say? Yeah. But anyway, so that was my start. And I love to tell the story because, it's not like you have to be, a special person to get into this field. It's a wide open field, as we've seen with the ladies there in Rwanda.
Well, and this is what I wanted to branch off into next as part of our conversation is how you came over twice to Rwanda. Mm-hmm. I happened to be there for 3 years. Randy came over at about 1.5 years into my time there and helped run 2 cohorts of teaching 50 women for a week-long session on the ISTQB standards and certification, of which we realized as we were building an opportunity in Rwanda for these women and employment which would occur overseas, whether you want to call it offshore, and we call our model co-sourcing, meaning we want to prepare them to actually be virtually situated within teams in North America. And so Randy conducted the 2 separate week sessions in the learning sessions. And were there, how would I say it, Randy, is you talked about the satisfaction you got from testing, and I'm kind of envisioning you're opening a gift. You found something that you truly feel alignment with, whether it's the problem solving component, figuring out what could go wrong before it does, catching the engineering direction and maybe steering it as it goes. Are there attributes that you saw in the women in Rwanda that would let you believe or make you believe, or you've seen that they are very successful at what they do in QA testing? Any in particular?
Sure, sure. In fact, when you picked me up at the airport on my second trip over, we were actually talking about that on the way to your house. And, I'd had time to process my first trip over there. And it was such an amazing trip because I saw in that first group and the second group too, something that I'd never seen in any of the classes that I'd taught before. And that is how hard they worked at learning the material, at doing the exercises and applying it. But more than that, the critical thinking and the teamwork. And, this was not, just to make it clear, this was not just a testing class we did. You talked about the cohort. This was a whole curriculum that Michael and Adele put together. And it included all kinds of things that were there to build their attributes as well as their skills, teamwork. But the thing about it is the culture is that you don't have to tell people, here's how you team. They work as a team because of their culture. Right. And that's a huge thing. And, when you have that kind of teamwork, then you can have huge amounts of success and huge amounts of value. And they were eager to learn. And I've seen them on projects after I've left, and my opinion has not changed one bit. In fact, if anything, it's just increased. That they're a wonderful group and they are excellent at what they do.
Yeah, well, thank you for that feedback, Randy. Part of that learning 6-week learning session, or 8-week learning session rather, was the competency-based learning the different competencies that are required and the work readiness blended with the technical expertise that you were able to bring. And we saw at the end that these women had, like you said, an affinity for working within community. They had this naturalness in them to pay very close attention to detail. Mm-hmm. They were brilliant thinkers at problem solving. And I think in some sense, for many of them, we found the sweet spot for what they were yearning to do as a profession, and then were able to open the doors with opportunities in North America to fully exercise that. So I want to thank you, Randy, for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, that was great. And then I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind just retelling a little bit of your story on cheap pizza and QA testing. I love that story, and it makes a lot of sense to me where we find ourselves in testing. Yeah. Sure.
Well, it was an article that I wrote for my blog actually several years ago, and it was born out of an experience where there's this little pizza shop right down the road where I live. I mean, it's my go-to place, and their pizzas are like $5, and you can get a pepperoni pizza, and you can get it fast, hot. It's just there, and it's great. And it got me thinking of all the pizza places that are around here. There are many others. They may charge a little bit more to 2 or 3 times more. But the thing about it was I wasn't seeing the increase in value in relationship to the price of what I was paying for the pizza. And I know it's kind of a crazy example, but we kind of see the same thing in what we do in testing. That it's possible to spend huge amounts of money in testing and still not get the value out of it that you really need to see. And so when you think about value, you think about, well, really, what am I getting for my money? Right. And that's a message that a lot of test managers have never learned how to make. It's a lot of testers have never learned how to make that message either. And it goes way beyond, oh, I found 5 defects today. Okay, that's great. Well, so what? Well, if armed with the right knowledge about this, you can make the bridge to say, yes, and had those defects been found by our customers, they would have probably cost the company $25,000. because the average cost per defect right now in the U.S. at least is about $4,500, maybe a tad north of that, per defect found in production, is because you have to do rework, you have to fix things that were affected by the fix, you have to deal with customer problems, and when you net that back into how much testing could we have done to prevent that, you can buy a lot of testing for $25,000. You can buy tools, you can buy training. And that's one of the things that Dr. Deming taught us, who went over to Japan after World War II, that you achieve quality not for the goodness of quality, even though that's a good thing to be known for quality, but you have quality so that you can be competitive as a business. And Harley Davidson learned that lesson. In the 80s, lost the business because of the quality of the motorcycles went way down. They turned it around. So did a lot of U.S. automakers. Now, I'm not talking software now, but you know what I mean. The improvements in quality should be able to translate to improvements in business.
That's great. No, I appreciate that perspective. So, Randy, as we move forward and we're bringing the offering from Rwanda to Canada to the United States, in order to make this model really effective, though, we've set it up with an international leadership team as well, though, working on the ground in Rwanda to be the bridge to our Canadian operations with Levvel and beyond. We find that that's a really important factor because we want to be making sure that the testing we are doing is for the business outcome that's desired by the organization. If it's not business outcome centric, it could just fall prey to being part of the routine with, then I would say, is diminished value in the overall goal. So our aspect is to have the highest quality people both on the ground in North America and the team over in Africa and Rwanda to then be able to offer a very unique experience to the customers here for their value. Quick question then: you've talked about companies that you've seen that have, we call it cheaped out, if you want to call it that, or pulled back, or maybe said, let's not spend that much effort on this. I think we've got it. Do you have any stories where you've seen that become a tragedy for organizations, both costly and reputation-wise? Because I think, if I may say, that we might say, okay, a bug costs this much to an organization, but how do you redeem your reputation when you've lost the customer's confidence?
Right. Well, probably one of the classic ones that, and I kind of had a little bit of touch into this in a way, not directly, but I was there before it happened and saw, as a result, one of the most infamous performance testing disasters had to do when Facebook had their initial public offering. I believe this is like in 2011, 2012. Don't hold me to that, but it was thereabouts in that neighborhood. And when the IPO went live on NASDAQ, the systems crashed. And so you know how it goes with an IPO. People are trying to buy, sell, trade, do that right away in an IPO because that's where you make your money typically. And so it took a few hours for them to get all that sorted out. And when they later did the root cause analysis, they found I think it was like 3 lines of code got into a tight loop or endless loop, as we say, caused that to fail. Well, the last time I checked, maybe a few months ago, the tally that NASDAQ has had to pay out because of that has been in excess of $80 million. And, it was funny the way, interesting, not funny, humorous, interesting the way that played out, because most of it were things like in fines, restitutions, lawsuits. It was just literally money wasted. And then the other hammer that fell was the Security and Exchange Commission in the U.S. They imposed a list of things that NASDAQ had to do to prevent such problems in the future. Now, interestingly, on that list was to establish a QA department. Well, the reason I say interesting, because I'd been there, I guess it was around 9/11, probably early 2000s, and I was working with several of the stock exchanges at that time, NASDAQ being one of them, and they decided to eliminate the QA department right at the end of my engagement. Successful job, Randy. And the sad thing was we had done all this work. They had great test environments. They were bringing in great tools, great people. And then someone up above decided we don't need all that stuff. We'll just fix it on failure, which was a common mantra back then because the internet came along and that was the mode of doing things. We'll put it out there. We'll make it better. Well, that's all well and good until it turns into a nightmare. Apple found that out with Apple Maps as well. They released that, I think, in iOS 6, and everyone was laughing at them. The thing about it was, okay, they got rid of the QA department, and then they had to reestablish it later after this very, very costly failure. And, I'm not trying to bash them. I'm just saying that that's one of the many stories, as they say in the Naked City. It's,
lessons learned. Right, exactly. Well, Randy, listen, before we depart here, I'd like to ask you just one final question. As we're doing our on the level conversations here, if I could ask you for what does business in balance mean to you? That is how we see ourselves doing business with Levvel, and I'd love to hear from your perspective. What does business in balance mean to you?
Well, to me, it means that you don't focus on just one thing. You have to look at holding several things together at the same time. And I know in my testing practice, I always describe myself as a holistic consultant because I always look at people, process, and tools as these three legs that really technology stands on in total, but testing especially. You don't solve it just with process. You don't solve it just with people or just with tools. And I'm really thankful that I came to that understanding very early in my career by reading one of Jerry Weinberg's books, The Psychology of Computer Programming. And so I've always had a very human-oriented approach here. But when you take that into business, you have to understand that, yes, I can overinvest in tools. I can overinvest in process. I have to have it in balance because at the end of the day, if you're not making a profit, then you're not going to be able to sustain all of that anyway. And honestly, that's why so many QA efforts get scrapped, is because someone up in senior management looks at it and says, we're spending like $1 million on testing. What are we getting from it? And no one can articulate it. So therefore they say, well, maybe we can do without it. And that kind of ties back into the previous stories. So the balance comes in. It's where you're getting the value, you're making a profit, and I'll put one other thing on too. People are having fun. They like working at your company. You haven't turned it into a funeral, and I've seen enough situations where work is just a drudgery. People dread going into work, and it doesn't have to be that way. You can have a fun and engaging workplace without it just being goof off time all the time. People can love the synergy, they can love the teamwork, they can love their accomplishments, and being known for doing something great. That is kind of how I see balance.
Well, that is fantastic, Randy. It takes me back to one of our final conversations at our house in Kigali when you were over there on the second trip, and we were talking about branding of companies, branding of organizations, but branding as individuals and branding of ourselves. And I remember, I remember saying it was very clear to me, if I was to think of Randy Rice, what would the brand be? And that was of excellence, and that you don't do anything less than as an expert striving for the best. And for me, that is a full summary of your approach, including everything you've said today, that, we have a chance to be excellent in life. We have a chance to be excellent in the roles that we do and the jobs that we do and the people, the process, the tools. But it's always about the people. For me, that's the glue of the whole thing, but also the main operating system. So on that note, Randy, I want to say thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your insights and, years of experience. It's a real pleasure to see you again, and look forward to talking again soon. So thanks again, Randy. Thanks for joining us for On the Level today.
Okay, thank you.